Welcome to Series 5, Episode 7 of Tree Lady Talks, and this week Sharon is talking to a senior arboricultural consultant from Tim Moya Associates. She's going to be talking about her use of Lidar scanning, and I have my own theory about the word Lidar, which I'll tell you later. And interestingly, it's about a project to redevelop the Grosvenor Square Gardens, and I'm actually going to be talking to Kimberly Howard as well, and I should be asking her about her parents' fruit farm in Polstead in Suffolk, and asking her how many apples a year they pick. And don't forget, watch this entire interview on our YouTube channel at Tree Lady Talks, and you can find out a little secret that's not on this version. Let's get on with it.
So, welcome to Kimberly Howard, Senior Arboricultural Consultant from Tim Moya Associates. Kimberly, we've known each other for a few years, haven't we?
Hi, we have, Sharon.
So I'm really interested in new technology. Things are moving really fast in ARB, and I heard that you gave a presentation. Tell us about the situation for your client. Let's give us some background.
So the project that we've been working on for a number of years now is at Grosvenor Square Gardens, which is in Mayfair, central London. And we're going to redevelop the gardens. It's the third time in the garden's history that this has occurred. The gardens date back to the 1720s. And it was a meeting place for London's society. It was the first oval garden that was created. And it copied from Michelangelo's Capitolone Hill in Rome. So for about 200 years, its history has been mainly horticultural, and then it shifted to a bit more of a memorial landscape following the Second World War. So we have the Franklin D. Roosevelt Memorial and the Eagle and Squadron Memorial. They're both Grade 2 listed. The gardens itself is a registered park and garden, and then there's the non-listed 9/11 Memorial. So we're looking, as I say, as a project team and as the client of Grosvenor to redevelop the gardens, and as part of that, we're introducing a whole suite of new features. We're going to have a shaded woodland garden, new footpaths. We're going to have new social ovals, areas to display art plinths, some wetland ponds, but crucially we're also going to introduce two buildings within the southern part of the gardens, and it's with those buildings that we've actually looked at the technology, because they're going to be placed underneath two mature London plane trees. And obviously we need to ensure that the foundations are respectful of the roots, to ensure that there's not going to be any harm or damage to them. So that is where we've actually started to introduce the technology of LiDAR scanning.
Wow. So what did you do first then? So tell me about the process.
So the process, so we've done an initial investigation to see essentially what is there. So kind of phase 1 investigations occurred this year, end of April, beginning of May. And we opened up a couple of trenches. And initially, as you well know, Sharon, you put a specification together, and the trees make you look a little bit foolish.
Yeah.
The roots don't do what you think they do. So we'd said, okay, these plane trees will open up to a metre depth. So we got buskins in with their air spades. Yeah, so it was fantastic. So we collaborated with them, and we opened up the first of the trenches. And there wasn't any roots there.
Oh, wow. See, this is a thing, isn't it? So for those who don't know, who are new to ARB, an air spade is like a really high-pressure air lance down a metal pipe with a trigger coming off a big compressor unit, and it blasts out the air really fast. And the theory is it displaces the soil, and you can see what's going on underneath. Mm-hmm. It's actually really hard work. You need a sort of soil vat, like a giant sucking thing, don't you, to sort of suck up the soil as well.
You can do. In this case, the chaps on the ground actually spaded out, shoveled out the soil and just buried it away. But yeah, you can also complement it with a VAC-X. So it's quite a laborious method of displacement, but also it's the least harmful two roots in that respect. So when I say we didn't find any roots, we found the small diameter fibrous roots, but we were looking for the significant roots, the structural roots, because obviously they're of importance, particularly when we're trying to find the optimal location to put piles in. And so it was decided that we were about 3 metres from this tree. We could see the buttress roots. The soil was incredibly friable.
Well, see, can I just go back to that, because that's so helpful, because I used to use an air spade for 10 years, used to have one. And quite often in London, and we go, we're going to air spade that. And you'd lift the turf off, carefully store that on some tarpauling. You would have marked out where you're going to go. And then it's just like really solid clay. And you end up going down with the nozzle, and you can't get more than, say, a few inches or 100 mil. And you just sort of, it almost kind of like bakes the clay. And so, and other times you use it, and there's, particularly with our cities, there's like layers upon layers of built environment history, maybe even archaeology, and there might be an old basement. There's a whole load of literally stony rubbish, and then the air spade's really hard. But you can use that in combination with a spade, but when it's loose and friable, wow, you've struck gold there.
Knife through butter.
Wow.
We were winning. There has been disturbance throughout the gardens, I say, because of its 300-year history. But we were very fortunate. Yes, there was made ground there, but it was just beautiful, beautiful conditions. So as it then happened, we weren't finding the roots that we wanted to find. So we literally had to go deeper. And it was very interesting, and again, as you would often experience, you have to be quite reactive at these sorts of investigations, because the principle here is locating those roots and understanding their size and their distribution. So we ended up going to 2 metres, and we
2 metres. No, the two
2
things I want to
metres.
say to you about that.
Go
3
on then.
things I want to say, actually. First thing, just air spading in general, it is a really skilled and dangerous operation.
Mm-hmm.
So the people doing it need to be properly protected. They need to make sure that they don't blast their own skin. You've got like ear defenders on, you've got goggles on. I mean, when I used to go air spading, I used to finish at the end of the day and get the soil out my bra, because it literally goes everywhere.
It really does.
And actually can be sometimes a little bit harmful to roots as well if it's not used properly. Because let's be honest, the air spade actually blasts through all the fine roots. They will be destroyed, but they regenerate. In fact, some people say they will then benefit from that extremely loose, friable, new rooting environment when it's backfilled. But with the larger roots, people who don't know what they're doing, and I used to do it myself once or twice till I knew I learned better, but actually blast away the outer bark, the outer covering the roots. So it is quite a skilled operation, but when it works well, there's nothing like it, because I think that for the non-tree people, seeing an open trench with the roots there, it's a really powerful communication, isn't it? It's really immediate.
And you can see with the pictures here of both of the trenches fully opened of what we actually found in the end. I mean, as I say, this was Ruskins, who we're working with, many years experience. They do thousands of metres of trenches in London each year. So as I say, it was really nice to have that team that we worked with. So as I say, this particular trench, we had to then open up to 2 metres, but because of the soil conditions and the depth, normally safe working practice, you go to about a metre 0.2. Typically you'd then batter back the side so it wouldn't collapse. Exactly. We didn't have that here, simply because the roots were coming, or were going to be coming through in all manner of directions, so we had to then do a stepped excavation.
I know.
So that then meant making an even wider trench to literally come in, step down, and then get to where we wanted to go. So it almost doubled the amount of excavation that had to occur, extend the length of the survey. But then we started to find the roots that we knew were there, and it was around about 1.4 metres. It's the first of the significant roots. And when we say significant roots in Arb, we say those at 25 mil diameter or above. So we use our thumbs.
We use our thumb. Thick as your thumb.
Thick as your thumb. Off the top of my head, I think some of these were at least 80 mil and above. We found the big boys in there, and I believe with the first trench was about 20 significant roots we found, all come in manner of directions. And you would normally expect roots to keep going down. That's what you expect. We had some coming in, up, round, different angles. You could then see from one part of the trench we had to kick underneath a bench because we couldn't move the infrastructure at that time, so you could almost point to say, oh well, that route is still that one, or that's actually branched and bits and pieces. So it was really quite fascinating. So I say we went to 2 meters, and incidentally we also found some artifacts from the Second World War, because Grosvenor Square Garden was used by the Americans. We found actually a dog tag of one of the soldiers that was there. So that was quite interesting. So that was trench number 1. Trench number 2, we just went on the same principles. We'll just go to 2 meters.
So 2 meters is about 6 foot for our American audience. Hello in North America. Thank you for being so positive about the podcast. It kind of flies in the face of what we normally read, that roots are in the top, sort of 2 foot. But we know that they are adaptive. They will grow where they need to do their things. How old were these trees? Were they contemporaneous with the establishment of Grosvenor Garden, or were they much younger?
It's difficult. I wouldn't say that they date back to the 1720s, but I would at least say they're well over 100 years old.
Yes.
The stem diameters were about 1.2 meters. So it's quite an age, and given the prevailing site conditions, as I say, we've spoken about that fireball soil, they just plunged, because we did actually carry out some site investigations in January.
Yeah.
You know, your borehole, your percussion borehole, just all of that, and at about, I think it's just beyond 2 meters, maybe down to 5 meters, there's then gravel. There is clay eventually at some point, but generally it's I believe it's Kempton Park gravel. And don't vote me.
Well, we're not going to check that.
They've obviously just plunged. If the soil were to be different, clay, then it's, you know, most likely the roots would be higher up. But interestingly, with the other tree, when the smaller building is going, those roots were typically where you would expect them to find 600 to a metre, but we still went to 2 metres. And incidentally, we then found a pipe that we didn't know existed, a cast iron pipe. So we actually got a few people to look at that, because that wasn't on any services. It's just, you know, part of the nature sometimes of sites,
Yes.
such as ones of these age, that there's all the underground services. But it was very interesting that you've got 2 trees of similar ages but rooting quite differently, and they're only meters apart.
I wonder if it's due to, I read a paper recently on, I'm going to try and say it correctly, interest-specific variation. In other words, you and I are both ladies, we're both humans, and we don't look the same. I wonder if there's some genetic difference, but I don't know. I'm just pondering.
Exactly. We just don't know what's happened in the history of those trees growing, really, and what's occurred in the soil and the disturbance. But it was very interesting. And as I say, that was phase 1 excavations, which we still had to step the other trench and bits and pieces. And then once the trenches were opened, we opened one trench up at a time, and obviously following best practice, we'd make sure that the roots were then covered with damp hessian. There was boards put over night, over the weekends, so that we could then actually start the surveying. Because typically when we're looking for roots, it might be you're trying to put a fence post in, so oh there's a root there, we'll just shift it, or oh there's a few roots here, we'll then have to start looking a little bit more at X, Y and Z sort of thing. But for this, we needed precision and accuracy because of the importance of placing large structures underneath these trees and finding the optimum location of the paths, which follows the British standard of what we should be doing. And initially, we had thought about just using a topographical survey, because we had a previous project in Finsbury Circus Gardens where we also had London plane trees, opened up some trenches, and we did a topographical where we recorded where the roots were entering and exiting the trench, and then getting a few crest levels along the top and underneath to kind of work out the diameter. So it wasn't necessarily put on the arb for that measurements. It was all done accurately and precise. And as it happened, with what we uncovered and found, we ended up then going to Lidar.
So explain a little bit about what Lidar is in a nutshell.
So LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, and it uses rapid light pulses of infrared to reflect off objects and surfaces, and it records the time in which it returns to the apparatus, and it collects millions of points a second. It's absolutely phenomenal piece of kit. First time I've used it on a project, and there's a video and some photos that we can see here of it working. And essentially, you have to get your baseline. You have to do a topographical survey to begin with to get your darting points. So you have all your total station tripods set out. You have all your little darting points around the trench, and then it's this little camera, and it's on a tripod. It can be detached from the tripod, and it spins. And it records or sends out these lights, both vertically and horizontally. So it will spin in that direction. It will have a camera on the front, spin, and then it's got an orb in the middle, and that spins around, and it just captures millions and millions of points. And you can then put that into 3D model point cloud data. So for the first trench, we got 210 million points.
Wow.
It was phenomenal.
And how long did that take to do on the ground?
So not long at all. It probably took longer to set the kit up than it actually took to measure it. So each turn takes about 2 minutes. You move it around the trench. You may put it slightly in the trench, and then you literally just capture all of that. So you have these millions of points, and then it was our associates, Texo, that then worked with that data, because whilst we had it in 3D format, point cloud, which we could use ourselves, the project team could use, it was really useful. Actually, we needed to flatten it into 2D to then be able to say to the structural engineers, these are where the roots are at the moment, and this is where we're suggesting the optimal pile locations, or not where the optimal pile locations are. Actually, what we did, we placed buffers around the roots, and then we had just the spaces in between those where piles potentially could go. As I say, that's the phase one. We did that for both of the trenches, very consistent. As I say, we've got videos and photos that you can see of that in practice, but also you can see the 2D images that we've pulled from that point cloud data, just to show how we've worked it. And again, I've got some further pictures of the actual buffers that we've put around the roots, just to show you listeners basically the process that we've gone of how we've used that data. By no means does that mean the pile layout is fixed at this time, because it was just an initial investigations, and then later this year we're actually going to excavate where the pile locations we would like to place them. We're going to open up those sections, but obviously if we then start finding roots, we're going to open up the middle bits in between. So it may be a bit of both. We may just have a selection of various holes, or we may have various trenches all combined and bits and pieces. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us as a project team to actually get this development started, and this kind of crucial bit of information for the rest of the engineers to work to. So as I say, we're ensuring that the harm to the trees is kept as low as particularly possible, and the damage. So it is absolutely fascinating. And as I say, that's why here at Tim Moya Associates we're really pushing and to share the knowledge with other ARBs, because it is really fascinating what we can now do with the technology that's coming.
Wow, no, I haven't used that. I think that's amazing.
Have to come on down.
Yeah, I know. I really will.
Have to come on down.
Yeah. So, okay, so you found the location for the piles. Well, in theory, the first draft of that. How has this information been received by the architects and the engineers and the client? Are they delighted, impressed?
Yes, I mean we had a WhatsApp group. So our WhatsApp is fantastic because it's instant, it's reactive. So we were sharing. Oh no, we found routes, we found all these bits and pieces. Because as I say, you have the various literature that talks about root morphology, what's roots typically do, and as I said earlier, trees do sometimes embarrass you
Yeah,
when
they
you're on site because
do.
they behave completely
Yep.
differently. And as the R be like, oh, that's not what I expected
Yeah.
there. But the roots were there. They weren't necessarily as dense. We had some worst case scenarios. So before we did all of this work, before we knew what was in the ground, obviously we knew roots were there. We had worst case scenarios. If the area was really, really dense, what would this mean for the pole layout? If it was moderately dense and if it was low density. So when we could actually send this to the project team, it was a case that the structural engineers, AKT2, were able to then say we can place piles here. It may be where we've had the distances in between. We can't necessarily have that because the routing means we have to increase that distance. We have to put another pile in somewhere else. So it showed that it was doable. It wasn't that's it. It's almost we can't get this going. It's we can. It's positive. The client particularly was happy with the work that's obviously occurred to date, and we're quite excited with the next round of investigations. We quite extensive work the next time, so that was really encouraging. And obviously, the closer to your tree that you go, obviously, the larger the roots and the less space typically you would expect. But we'll see.
And the other thing, so once you've designed that, is there going to be a void?
There is going to be a void, so we still have the water and gas exchange that's going to occur to the soil environment below, all the other build-up. We're ending stage 4 now. So again, for some listeners that not necessarily understand how planning works within England, we follow REBA stages, and it's just how we get to detailed and technical design, where we have like an in principle development, and then we're actually getting to the crux of how we build and develop this. So we're coming to the end of that.
So you're going to have this void, which is going to allow some gaseous exchange and water infiltration. Will you be having like down pipes that will be directed underneath the building, or it's really difficult to work this out, isn't it?
Okay, so the building, I probably should have said at the start, the two buildings, one is going to be for the grounds maintenance staff, Grosvenor grounds maintenance staff, and it's going to have some public toilets in it. And then the second building is going to be an education facility with a little kiosk. And both of them are going to have green roofs. So we've got Gary Grant of the Green Infrastructure Company assisting with that, as well as Nigel Dunnett with the landscaping. So the weight of the buildings is quite considerable. And I believe Gary had said it was the equivalent to either 10 or 12 fully grown African elephants.
Wow.
The weight with the saturated, that's for the larger building. So it's phenomenal. So being that they're under London plane trees, particularly when the London plays are in leaf, they're actually going to take quite a lot of the rainfall just generally with their canopy and their leaves. So anything that does then fall will be on that green roof. So any residue from that, we do have the downpipes, and they're going to go into like a gravel setup, because all around the buildings there's going to be new horticulture and landscaping. So rather than washing all of that soil away, we're going to just try and get it to go into the gravel, so then it will just start to dissipate into the soil. And roughly where the downpipes are, they're on the highest bit of that land, so there'll be a slight gradient. So any water that is left after all of that bits it needs to get down will go back to the roots.
So quite often on my sites, which are complex like this, although I've not used the Lidar, you get it all sorted, you're all happy, you're feeling smug, and then the electricity cables, the water, the sewage is often the thing that can be an absolute problem which hasn't been worked out yet, and you say to the client, have you thought about the surface water, the foul water? And I say, yep, it's going to be fine, we're going to do this, and then it all changes, and that can have massive implications. Do you think that those engineers will have your point cloud data? And
we've already been working. We're already working. So with the next round of investigations that we're going to be undertaking, we're actually going to open up a trench as well for the drainage, because we're not quite sure yet how the drainage is going to be installed, whether we're going to auger it or whether or not we're going to just do a kind of traditional excavation. It really does depend what the root activity is doing. So we're going to open that up. The main drainage is going near to the building where the roots were higher in the soil. So it may be that we're able to actually go between those or whatnot. So that was quite encouraging. That's why it was so useful to do this first phase of investigations. And then in terms of the services and utilities, there is a bit of a tight spot, but we do have an existing green pillar, feeder pillar in there, which is all the services are going to come out from. The services are going to be air spaded. There is a slight build up of a layer of the, I don't want to say soil, but almost like a mulch, where we're going to then plant the new planting into it, rather than going straight into the soil. So you've got kind of that element already. Is about 150 to 200 mil. So really the services, they don't need to be going really deep, and the beauty of it is we can actually weave those once we get the duct in, and that can just weave through the roots. So we've been looking at everything. As I say, we're coming to the end of stage 4. Literally it will conclude this end of this month. So all of these points we've looked at in great detail, and the lead architects on this BDP have been BDP. So we've been working. We've got a whole suite of experts working on this. It's a prestigious gardens. It's phenomenal. As I say, it's the third time only that the gardens have been redeveloped, and the vision is to create an extraordinary urban garden with groundbreaking credentials, and to make it world class and leading. That it's this green oasis within Mayfair and central London. So we're all very proud to work on it, and we want to make sure that everything goes as it should, with best practice.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Oh, brilliant. So, an example of world-class technology making a huge difference to how we do our job.
Hello, Kimberly. It's Noel's question of the week. My question of the week this week: how much apple juice do you make in a year?
Goodness me. So, listeners, my family have a 30-acre fruit farm in Polstead in Suffolk, and I brought over a couple of bottles of apple juice to Noel and Sharon, because I know Noel loves our apple juice. We press it. We have it pressed locally, and as to how many bottles, it varies because of the crop.
Do you pick them yourself?
We do. All the trees are picked by hand, pruned by hand. In its heyday, we had 30,000 fruit trees. I say over 30 acres. We are changing the setup of how we grow them now. So we're doing them on wires, so they go up a lot higher, rather than the traditional rows. So we can get closer spacings in between those. But in terms of how many bottles, Noel, maybe 10,000.
Most people promote books. Kimberly Howard, apple juice. Kimberly, thank you so much.
Thank you, Noel.
Noel's question of the week.
So, Kimberly, I'm always really fascinated about how people got into our strange career. Tell us about your background, please.
Oh, goodness. I would say I fell into the career. So my background will go back to my teenage years. So I finished my GCSEs, couldn't quite decide on my A-levels. And it was actually my dad who said, how about Whittle College? and go into a course there that's almost bespoke, rather than saying I'll do biology, I'll do PE, and I'll think about it. Because I thought I was going to be a sports scientist or a physiotherapist. I was going to go to Loughborough University when I was 15, 16 years old. That's what I thought I wanted, but I was very outdoorsy. My parents knew that, so they took me to Writtle. So I did a national diploma in countryside management. It was very focused, and as part of that course I had to do a work placement, and I went to Chelmsford Borough Council as it was back in 2006, and I started doing a day a week at Highlands Park in Chelmsford, and then I did another day of the week, so it was Monday and Friday, and the other day of the week I was a part of the countryside rights of way team, going around checking all the footpaths, and as things happened I enjoyed Highlands Park so much that I said, can I actually do both days there? And one thing led to another. I'd finished my kind of volunteering time there, and said, do you have a little placement for me? Which they had. So I carried on working there throughout my studies. I then went on to do a degree at Writtle in conservation and environment. And how the degree was set up, it meant I also had 3 days in the week. So I continued to work at Highlands. So it was always good, obviously being a student as well. That was always quite nice. And then upon my graduation, it would have been about 2011, the head gardener retired. So there was a opportunity then for to go in. They changed, I think, the title of the role. They changed it to charge hand. Not very glamorous, but they changed. Essentially, it's the same thing, in charge of the small team. And I thought, okay, I finished. Let's see. I hadn't got anything really lined up of what I wanted to go into. I said, let's see. And I was very fortunate to then get that job. So I was in my early 20s, a female, leading a team of male grounds maintenance staff in Highlands Park, which is over 500 acres in size, and also had about 30 garden volunteers as well. And Highlands is a mixture of gardens, grassland, trees. So I learnt a bit along the way. Obviously, we had the tree officer, Dave Ford of Chelmsford Council. He would pop up. There'd be tree surgeons popping up, and I found it quite interesting. And as the years progressed, a job then came up within the planning department at what was then Chelmsford City Council, because we got city status. And I thought, oh, actually, this seems to fit with what I studied, what I enjoy. And it was a natural environment officer, so dealing with trees and ecology within development management. I applied, I got the job. So you could say the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, tell people who don't know you.
Yeah, I could say the rest is history, but it isn't. So I then went from predominantly being outside to then having a kind of a split kind of work pattern of being partly in the office, part outside, considering works to protected trees, protecting trees through tree preservation orders, considering high hedge complaints, hedgerow removal notices, so a whole suite of things, but also being a consultee on planning applications. So providing advice to planning officers, policy officers about development, either that was being proposed or perhaps that was coming forward in local plans. So I had all of that, and as things gone on, I went into a senior role, and as part of that I also was representing in public inquiries, which they're always unique and delightful, as you can appreciate, Sharon. So I really had a lot under my belt, and whilst I was still at the council, I undertook my professional tree inspection qualification. I also did my level 4 diploma with tree life, and then I wanted more.
Yes.
And we had a chat.
Yes, we did.
We had a chat because I knew my time in local authority had sadly come to an end. As I say, I wanted to develop and grow. I wanted to be with more ARBs and learn more on what the foundations I'd built on. So I say we had a nice chat. You supported me, and I always appreciate that. And I had a few places in mind, of which one was obviously Tim Moya Associates. So I popped Tim my letter and my CV a couple of years ago, and here I am sat now representing myself and Tim Moya Associates.
And you get that great experience in consultancy, because it is so very different from being a tree officer, isn't it?
It is. It's completely the other side now, and I actually wrote about this in the Arb magazine. I believe it must have been published earlier this year. The two sides of planning of what I've uncovered and found throughout my journey of being a consultant, predominantly in the private sector, and to how that compares to being a tree officer. The roles, yes, they're intertwined, but they're also very different, because you're obviously representing your client, and you're looking at how to support them with their proposals, giving them balanced advice and recommendations, and to kind of lead them on that journey and support them. And with the tree officer, you're very much the consultee. You have almost the institution that you're part of. You have your members, you have your planning officers, you have all the different levels, and you have planning policy. So it was a change, I would say. It took me a couple of months to kind of go through that transition, as you will appreciate, because we were both at the same council, albeit years apart, but you've had the same similar journey in that respect. So if you haven't read the article, I'm just going to do an unashamed post. Do read the Arb magazine article. I think it was either the winter or spring edition. So I've just given a bit of an insight. I had some nice feedback on that. So it just to be open and honest, really, as to what we face. And I think as well, having been a tree officer, I do appreciate what tree officers have to go through. And
yes, you never forget, and never should you.
No. I'm not going to tell all of the stories. We haven't got enough time of that. But I do have a degree of sympathy for the tree officers and generally local planning authorities, because it is a tough time.
Brilliant. So, Kimberly, what for the future for you? Any future ambitions for your career?
Oh, goodness. Well, as I said to begin with, I have got a little one on the way. So we're very, very excited about that. I'd like to grow some more within TMA. I particularly like doing presentations and mentoring. I was very fortunate to mentor a few kind of junior officers at my time at Chelmsford, so I really enjoyed that. And I think the beauty of being within a consultancy practice is you can specialise. I'm not quite sure as of yet what speciality I want to go into. It might be that at some point I look towards becoming a registered consultant and having that under my belt. But for now, I'm just enjoying the experience and the knowledge that is just coming out of.
Well, very well done. It's been a pleasure to know you over the years and to continue to do so. And thank you for sharing that really detailed technical story. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Kimberly. Great interview. All the very best for the future, which, if you've watched this now on the YouTube channel, you'll know why I'm saying that. I have my theory about Lidar. I actually think it's Luke Fay, you might have heard speak to Sharon a couple of weeks ago, and he asked her whether she had a superpower. And I think if he asked me, I think I'd say, yeah, I've got a superpower. I can tell when people are fibbing to me, because I have a Lidar unit and it goes off every time someone's not telling the truth. Oh, please yourselves. Well, we will see you next time, and you will hear us next time on Tree Lady Talks. It's been a great interview. We're delighted for Kimberly and all the family. And if you haven't seen YouTube, go there now at Tree Lady Talks on YouTube. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody.